Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Okay, another graphic. I love the fact that my little momentum steam train, whatever is about the photographs. But then, yeah, why not? Who cares? Let's use these graphics. It's perfect. So this is just a standard kind of graph with the sort of the y-axis is carbon footprint, kilograms of CO2 per kilograms of food, or CO2 energy, I guess.
CO2 emissions.
Emissions, okay, emissions. And on the x-axis is meat. So you have beef mince, lamb, pork loin, chicken breast, chicken thigh. And clearly the largest sort of bar is beef, T-bone steak. And then as you go down the list, I mean, the chicken thigh, which is the relatively lowest. So what are you saying?
Yeah, so this is back to our conversation on the magnitude of these different things. So, so I went, as I say, I went vegan half the week.
Yeah.
Because on my numbers, if everybody did that, that's enough to get towards net zero agriculture.
And by the way, I have to say this. I have to interrupt. You're with friends. I'm on your side. I'm with you now.
Yeah.
If you looked at my diet, it is effectively vegan for half the week. Like, just do your best. So listen, I understand who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it is in my house. So yeah.
So, I've got an admission to make. I did my best, but it probably only lasted 6 months.
Okay.
And then I gradually started just falling back into my old eating habits.
Well, there are patterns. Okay.
Yeah. Which is kind of what led me to think, well, okay, but can we do this differently? Instead of being vegan half the week, my usual diet the other half of the week, can we just do the whole week but do it better?
Right.
So
okay.
Can I create meat-based dishes that are low carbon, which led me on to thinking, can I create classic recipes that everybody regularly cooks at home, but can I make them dramatically lower carbon? And kind of that was the idea for where the cookbook came, because it wasn't going well for me being a vegan. I couldn't stick to it.
You poor thing.
I'm weak-willed.
No, well, look, I also think that I've been having a lot of arguments or discussions with people about how we don't have free will, right?
Yeah.
Like that from a neurobiological point of view, it's really hard to prove that we have free will. And so feeding into that, pun intended, is that what happens if you go 6 months and then you're just like, I need a steak. Like and in your head, it's just like, I just miss the flavor or whatever. But what happens if there's something that you can't affix a sentence to that is more, that is neurochemical, that is.
Yeah.
But I'm sure somebody who's fully vegan is going to be like, you bastard, you don't know nothing. But anyway, so as you were saying, I interrupted you, and that's how I am as an interviewer. You decided to remake these recipes.
Yeah, touching on that, because that's something that I'm quite interested in, is free will, reality consciousness. And I'm listening to a podcast at the moment on quantum consciousness.
Right.
So it sounds like you've taken quite a reductionist view of free will, in that we form our consciousness from electrons and neurons firing around our brain, which are physical things, and therefore there's knock-on effects, and it's Newtonian, and how can there be free will?
Right.
You want to listen to quantum consciousness and the probabilistic quantum world where nothing's set in stone until we interact and measure it.
Okay.
That's how you start forming a view of free will and consciousness and science that we understand about. We don't understand, but we know about and we use.
I love it.
That might be a little tip for you.
But we digress.
And as an aside from quantum consciousness, we need to talk about beef and steak,
yes,
and chicken and vegetables. So I put that chart on there very simply because this gives you a range of a scale, the scale of the whole thing. So the T-bone steak is the worst. Or what's that about? I can't remember. It's
It's like 80 something.
80 something kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of steak. Why? Because cows use loads of land, which means loads of deforestation. They have these ruminant burps, which is that methane, direct emissions as well. And then thirdly, they take a long time to mature, and that means lots of feed through their lives. So of all the crops we grow on the planet, half of them we consume, the other half we feed to animals, but we only get about 10% of the calories back. So rearing animals, rearing them for a long time is hugely inefficient. But then if you compare that beef and lambs, pretty bad, lambs on there, it's about 25. But then you go all the way down and you start to see, well, pork is maybe around 5 to 7, chickens around 3 to 4, and then it's maybe not on that chart, but a vegetables around 1.
Right.
So this is the kind of magnitude, the scale of things, right? So you really want to be avoiding beef and lamb. Actually, pork and chicken aren't that bad if you're eating them in smallish quantities, as you would from protein. It's recommended. And this was actually another amazing thing that I found out when writing the book. So I wanted to also look at the dietary side of it and the recommended intake of calories. And actually it's recommended, and these are government health guidelines, UK, US. It's actually recommended that about you only meant to get about 10% of your calories from protein.
Right.
30% of your calories from fat, which really surprised me. And then the rest from carbohydrates. So I always had it in my head that a good diet was protein heavy. And I think it's kind of maybe a gym culture that we have in the UK or something that's kind of ingrained that into us, that protein is good, carbs are bad, fat's definitely bad. Actually, you need balance. You want to avoid saturated fat, but unsaturated fat is that needs to be nearly a third of our calorie intake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have this. And you mentioned almonds as being, you feel guilty for eating almonds because they've had bad press around them, and that's because of water use and the where they're farmed, and it's a lot of them come from California, I think, don't they? Avocados are another sort of vilified fruit and veg because they come from Mexico. There's cartels moving in. They consume a lot of water. Again, there's been articles about mini earthquakes. And yes, some of the supply chains around this vegan type foods, there's been exponential growth in the consumption of things like avocados and almonds. And whenever something grows very quickly, supply chains get strained and you start to get these problems. But that's fixable. If you look at it on a fundamental basis, let's look at the carbon emissions of an imported avocado coming from Mexico into the UK. Yeah, it's probably about 2 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of avocado. Okay, that's twice as bad as your average bit of fruit and vegetable, which is about 1. But it's still half as much as chicken or pork and 10 times less than beef or lamb. Yeah. So you can see how you can form a simple set of rules to make sure that your cooking is very much low carbon. And so we've got a set of kind of 7 rules in the book, 7 or 8 rules, which we apply to all the classic recipes that I put in there. But also you can take away to your weekly shop. You can take these rules away to when you're eating out in a restaurant and choosing your food. Or if you run a food business or a cafeteria or whatever it may be, start thinking about these things when you're creating your menus.
Right.
So that's really why I wanted to write the book, is to get people thinking about these things. And not that we have to go black and white, it's either meat or vegan, but there is somewhere in the middle that is actually very, very good.
Some of the things that occurred to me as you're speaking are who your market should be are the heads of cafeterias, the heads of restaurants, the heads of, one of the successes of industrialized food is how many times the perspective or the lens is shifted onto the individual person, like what you should do at home, because locally you'll affect globally and whatever. Yeah, sure. But in terms of the economics, I mean, if your book could influence a high school cafeteria, that would have like a really large footprint, right?
Yep. And it already has. So I've been into my children's school, and
Amazing.
I give talks to the kids, and they've made changes around their snacks and food that they
But
have
who
in
cares
school.
about the kids? It's the administrators, like
Yeah,
kids
yeah, yeah,
schmids.
yeah.
Who cares?
But yeah, you're absolutely right. So I basically I wanted to show that you can make all the recipes that you know and love, but you can do it, and they're going to be way lower carbon, and actually they're also going to be better for you because they're going to end up when you sort of supercharge foods with a bit more plant-based, you avoid red meats, you start cooking
Hmm.
healthier food. So
Hmm.
the average recipe in the book out of the 70 recipes I've done, 75% less CO2
Wow.
per meal.
Nice.
So if you cook each of them in the book, you save half a ton of carbon emissions.
Oh,
But
wow.
also they have 40% less fat and saturated fat,
Got it.
particularly, and 20% fewer calories for the same serving size. So it's stuff that's good for you. It's also good for the planet.
I love it. Now, I am such a shitty host that I'm actually going to insult you right now. I'm going to,
Okay.
it's like, I'm a bad host. Like, I just invite you on my show. Like, so, why have you not named your book yet? It's going to be in the show notes, but what is the name of your
Yeah,
book?
that's a good point. Yeah, so Climate Change Kitchen.
Are you say that again?
Climate Change Kitchen.
Climate Change Kitchen. Thank you. You're showing it to me. Oh, it's a
There you go.
beautiful
So
book. You made the photograph, the cover photo.
I've done all the photography, cover, everything. Yeah, so fight global warming with good food, meat and plant-based, reduce calories, simple cooking, the world's best dishes with a low carbon twist. And that's what it is. Simple.
That is going to be in the show notes as well as a previous episode. But definitely, we're going to be naming your cookbook again because we're going to have to sell the fuck out of it. So, anything else you want to say about this particular graph? I mean, like, sure, it's what we know. I mean, if you've been around this world a little, I mean, if you've read a couple of articles and you haven't closed your
Yeah,
eyes, it's clear that beef, minced beef or T-bone steaks is the worst.
yeah, yeah. Lamb is also bad.
Lamb is
Chicken
also
and
bad.
pork, my messaging is chicken and pork, not too bad in moderation.
Okay.
Near every vegetable is going to be better than meat, regardless of where it's come from in the world.
Right.
And then seafood's probably the tricky one. That's where the rule there is that you want to go for mollusks. So clams,
Okay.
scallops, mussels, because they're
Right.
generally sustainably farmed off coastlines. So it's low
Yeah.
emissions. It also filters and cleans the water. So it's really great actually for the ocean. Avoid crustaceans. So prawns, lobsters,
Oh.
crab, because they tend to be either farmed at the expense of natural mangroves, so these
Mm-hmm.
natural sort of ocean systems that get destroyed, or they kind of trawl the floor of the ocean, which means you dig up all the ocean floor and you destroy all
Yep.
the natural ocean system there and you release CO2. So that's in terms of shellfish. And then in terms of fish, you want to go for fish that basically swim in big schools and are easy to
Mm-hmm.
catch because then you don't burn a load of diesel trying to catch
Yeah.
these things. So stuff like herring, mackerel, skipjack tuna's not bad. So just always make sure it's responsibly sourced.
Mm-hmm.
What's more difficult to find? Things like salmon. Your salmon can be good, but it can also be really, really bad, and it's quite hard
Yeah.
to tell. So you kind of hedging your bets if you try to avoid salmon. And then, obviously all these other sort of big whitefish species, which are overfished and also harder to catch, tend to have higher
Yeah.
emissions. So those are the kind of rules around fish that we follow. The recipes have no beef or lamb, but we'll use chicken, pork, and those types of lower impact fish and shellfish. Oil's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
So we massively overuse oil in cooking, I believe. So like 1 tablespoon of oil has something like 70 calories in it. So if you're just
Yeah.
glugging oil in, you're adding a ton of calories to your cooking for no real reason.
Mm.
And you're also adding a load of emissions because oil, yes, it comes from plants, but it's like concentrated plants. It's like
Right.
the oil that we dig out of the ground. It's concentrated plant, and so it has a relatively high emission. So the only thing I recommend buying for low carbon cooking is a little sprayer, like an oil sprayer. So one
Oh.
spray of that 1 or 2 sprays is the equivalent of a tablespoon because it disperses that oil over your pan.
Right.
Because all you're using the oil for is to get the pan hotter and cook it and crisp up your food.
Yeah.
And that's like a couple of milliliters instead of 15 mil for a tablespoon.
Sure.
So you're dramatically reducing the amount of calories you're putting in there, the fat content, and you're reducing the emissions as well. So these are the kind of tips, right?
Right. No, I love it. One more time, the title of your book, and then we'll go on to the next photo.
You're good. You get better. Climate Change Kitchen.
Climate Change Kitchen. Available online.
Cool Planet. Available everywhere. Yeah, Amazon, like Waterstones, big box retailers in the US.
Nice.
You can get it in different
Wicked.
places.
Well done. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.